Skip Alzheimer, welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show. We are pre-recorded today as we are flying to Toronto, Canada. I am seeing some friends who moved there from Raleigh, doing 2 talks at University of Toronto, and maybe celebrating Canadian Thanksgiving. I'm kind of excited by that concept. This will be one of potentially 2 Thanksgiving events that we'll be celebrating in October, and maybe we won't celebrate Thanksgiving in November at all. But in honor of what we are doing as we fly, I picked some films about Canada, some of which, or most of which, we've shown before. But Canadian Atlantic Provinces is a film by Cornet, and I don't think we're actually going to an Atlantic province, according to this film. I'm not sure. I have to look and see. Next is Alouette, Canada's first satellite. Then the Great Annual Bathtub Race, which I believe is in Western Canada. Everybody's Prejudiced, which is a great film about prejudice, made by, I think it's National Film Board, but maybe not, maybe another. And then Royal Canadian Mounted Police Musical Ride, which is a weird film that basically shows kind of these mounted police doing different types of. It's almost like a Busby Berkeley, but the music is not as good. But it's still great. I like it because it is kind of meditative. I remember showing it to, for some reason, Thor. I don't know if you know the heavy metal Canadian guy, Thor, John Michael Thor. He actually came to my house once, back when the archive and the house were the same, and I showed him some films about Canada, and this is one of the ones I showed him, and he just laughed and laughed and laughed, and then he tore my phone book in half. Back when we used to have phone books, Thor, that's one of the tricks that he could do with his strength. He could blow up a medicine bottle or hot water bottle, and he could also tear a phone book in half. Anyways, none of that is going to be in any of these films we're about to watch. I appreciate you tuning in. You can support us by going to ko-fi.com/avgeeks, patreon.com/avgeeks. But also just comment, hit thumbs ups, and share what we're watching. All right, everybody, enjoy.
The Atlantic Ocean's never far away from the people who live in Canada's Atlantic provinces. 3 of the Atlantic provinces, New Brunswick, with its capital at Fredericton, Nova Scotia, with its capital at Halifax, and Prince Edward Island, with its capital at Charlottetown, are called the Maritimes. Newfoundland, with its capital at St. John's, is the 4th Atlantic province. All 4 provinces are a part of the Appalachian Highlands, which run through eastern North America. This region's very old, with ancient, worn-down mountains. Labrador, part of the province of Newfoundland, doesn't lie in the Appalachian Highlands, but in the Canadian Shield. Not many people live here, even though it's more than half the area of the Atlantic provinces. Because the four provinces are next to the sea and are relatively close to Europe, they were reached fairly easily by early explorers, like the Vikings. They're believed to have landed on Newfoundland about 500 years before Columbus sailed. The Vikings didn't stay. John Cabot rediscovered the area in 1497 for England. Later, it was claimed as an English colony. Meanwhile, the French built the Port Royal habitation in Nova Scotia, claiming the area of the Maritime Provinces and New England. They called their claim Acadia. The British later resettled most Acadians in other parts of North America. Evangeline, the heroine of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem, is probably the most famous Acadian. The French, Indians, and English all fought for control of the area. The French built forts to guard their New World possessions. The Europeans wanted the waters for exploration, colonization, and fishing. Some Acadian families still live in fishing villages. They've kept their French language and many French traditions. People from Scotland, Ireland, and other European countries came to the Maritimes too, with other customs. English loyalists moved to the provinces from the United States during the Revolution. They started lumbering industries. And they started shipbuilding industries. Both are still important. Their ships include championship racing schooners. For years, ships provided the principal transportation between North America's colonies. In 1864, ships brought Canada's colonial leaders to Prince Edward Island to plan their new nation. The leaders, called the Fathers of Confederation, met for the first time in Charlottetown. Here they started building Canada's federal government. Many of the maritime Canadians earn their living at sea. Ships and equipment are modern, but the fishermen's lives still involve risks and hard work. Lobsters are one of the most important seafoods exported by the Atlantic provinces. The fishermen catch and process a wide variety of seafood. They dry or fillet and freeze the cod they catch. There's also haddock, herring, salmon, oysters, and scallops. Fishing's common. The ocean's close, with a lot of natural harbors. Of course, there are other types of coasts, too. In the Bay of Fundy, between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, the ocean plays tricks with unusually high tides. and the high tide affects rivers like the St. John in New Brunswick, which flows one way and then reverses when the tide changes. At the headwaters of the Bay of Fundy, the incoming tide causes a tidal bore, a wall of water, sometimes up to 5 feet high. Besides the ocean, the Maritimes have inland water resources. By building dams and salmon ladders, Canadians hope to make the best of these resources. Lakes provide water for industry and recreation. Canadians use Nova Scotia's Annapolis River Valley and New Brunswick's St. John River Valley for farming. There's even potential for Newfoundland's bogs, which may be drained for farmland. Water affects life here other ways, like the fog that's common. Although there's fog and snow, the harbor of Halifax stays open in winter, making it a major trade center. On pleasant summer days, water resources offer plenty to do. Besides water resources, there are resources of the land. Lumbering supplies trees for construction and for pulp and paper. From forests, the wood goes to industries that are changing. Large factories like this pulp and paper mill are replacing smaller operations. Just as manufacturing wood products is traditional in the Maritimes, so is farming, especially on Prince Edward Island. Most of the island's game animals are gone because forests were cut to make fields. Its major crop is potatoes. The island's people use most of the other farm products. The other provinces grow fruit and produce milk and cheese. These then are the traditional Atlantic provinces. Enough farms to supply the individual provincial needs. Enough pulpwood to help Canada supply almost half the world's paper. And enough fish to compete in the world market. But modern technology is slowly changing the Maritimes. New methods of fish processing make possible a few large plants instead of many small ones doing the same work. Industries like fish processing attract people to work in St. John's and other cities. And mining's become more and more important. Coal mining and asbestos mining always have been. Various ores, lead, zinc, silver, copper, fluorspar, and especially iron, have made future mining promising. Steel manufacturing now makes Nova Scotia a leading industrial center. The province also manufactures heavy water for nuclear reactors. But changes don't come quickly. Many Canadians of New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland still live isolated, independent lifestyles, never far away from the Atlantic Ocean. Man is finding new ways of probing the cosmic unknown. Around Earth, tenuous matter forms great spheres in space. 60 miles up, the ionosphere begins, stretching 200 miles or more. A region of electrically charged particles formed by radiation from outer space. A region important in world communications because radio waves which do not follow the curve of the Earth can be reflected from the ionosphere. But sometimes great solar storms disturb the region. Radio signals fade and disappear. To forecast such turbulence, sounding stations around the world send constant signals into various layers of the ionosphere and record the echo. But these ionosondes cannot probe beyond the layer of greatest electron density, and more information is needed from above. In 1958, a program of topside sounding is conceived by the Defense Research Board of Canada and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration of the United States, NASA. Canada has a special interest in the project because radio blackout is most frequent in the North Polar regions. And so DRB undertakes to build a satellite for the sounding. Work begins in 1959. Design and construction of the spacecraft, to be called Alouette, the Lark, are put in the hands of a group of young engineers, men like John Marr and Colin Franklin of DRB. The USA will launch it. The plan is to launch the satellite from California into polar orbit. The vehicle is a two-stage rocket, Thor Agena B. The Thor burns until final velocity is reached. Then explosive charges release the Agena and spacecraft, and Agena's engine ignites. In the thin upper air, friction is slight. The protecting shroud is ejected. At cutoff, Agena is coasting. 48 minutes later, it reaches orbital altitude over Madagascar. After a final boost in orbit, a spring separates the satellite. As it spins, long antennas are driven out. 1 hour after liftoff, the new satellite is sweeping around a polar orbit 630 miles above the Earth. It will circle the globe every 105 minutes for centuries, transmitting signals to telemetry stations for at least 1 year of research. As the sounder moves into range, a command is sent out, and the long antennas transmit a pulsed radio frequency signal to the ionosphere below. At the same time, the pulses are put on a very high frequency signal that will pierce the ionosphere. The sounding signal is reflected, and the echo received by the satellite is transmitted to the ground. The time lag, about 1/100th of a second, giving the height of the ionosphere. Thus, transmitting a continuous signal, pulse and echo 60 times a second, the satellite reports on the top profile of the ionosphere, hour by hour, to telemetry stations around the globe. At the same time, it measures 3 other phenomena: radio noise due to rays from cosmic space, whistlers or radio signals caused by lightning which move along the Earth's magnetic field, and trapped particles, one of the causes of ionization in the ionosphere. Since there is no precedent for the topside sounder, rocket testing of the antenna system developed by the Canadians is an important preliminary. From Wallops Island, Virginia, rockets carrying the newly designed equipment are launched into the upper atmosphere. Signals that come back prove the system is definitely feasible. At DRB's telecommunications establishment near Ottawa, a structural model, a prototype, and 2 identical flight models are built. 2 half-shell spinnings form the skin of the aluminum spacecraft. The entire load is supported by a core. The central structure holds the antennas when stored and the batteries. Platforms on each side carry the transistorized sounder and the 3 other experiments. Standby units are provided to be switched on in case of a failure in space. It's a close fit. Power for the instruments is provided by 6,500 solar cells on the shell, which convert sunlight into electricity to charge the batteries. Inside temperature is maintained by polished aluminum end caps. Of unique new design are the long sounding antennas of thin spring steel, which form a tube with an overlapping open seam. During launch, they will be wound on drums as flat strips, like a carpenter's tape rule. Canadian industry contributed to the project by developing and building a number of important components. The prototype is given a centrifugal test simulating the vertical thrust to be experienced by the spacecraft during launch. Performance of the telemetry equipment monitored during test is completely satisfactory. A spin test simulates conditions as the satellite, spinning at 120 RPM, will be ejected into orbit. As the sounding antennas unwind, the spacecraft slows to its final speed, 1.5 RPM. Because of Earth's gravity, the antennas can be extended only 9 feet without support, but the test shows smooth operation so far. Next comes a full extension test. An electric motor drives the antennas out. Because of gravity, they must be supported. To conserve power, antennas should be half the wavelength transmitted. In this case, a length never before attempted in a spacecraft. The design works perfectly. The span is 150 feet from tip to tip. At another DRB research center near Quebec, performance is tested in a vacuum chamber, simulating conditions in space. Unknown factors may arise. Materials may sublimate at low pressure. Hundreds of wires from the instruments permit the designers to check performance during test. Air is pumped out of the chamber and an artificial sun shines through a port. To provide illumination evenly to all the cells, the satellite spins slowly as in space. The spheroid shape serves 2 purposes: easy access to electronic equipment, and secondly, illumination of a constant percentage of the surface as the spheroid tilts. Current generated by the solar cells is checked, and housekeeping data such as temperature in various parts of the spacecraft is observed. At Goddard Space Flight Center near Washington, NASA provides test facilities not available in Canada. Here, shining satellites in various stages of development are joined by Alouette. Like a giant automobile wheel, the satellite must be balanced. At full speed, the amount of imbalance is measured and correcting weights are added later. Although the spacecraft weighs 320 pounds, less than 2 pounds is needed for balance because of careful calculation during design. The highly sensitive solar cells, the elements most likely to be damaged by vibration, are checked with simulated sunlight after every mechanical test. Finally, the Alouette is mounted on a shake table, which sets up vibration like that experienced during launch. The sounding antennas are checked before the test, which is one of the most severe the spacecraft will undergo. Measurements of the vibration applied and resultant vibration in the satellite show that no serious resonance will develop. Housekeeping data checks show solar cells, batteries, and other components all performing normally. Alouette passes with flying colors. Protecting plates are again placed over the delicate solar cells for the final move as the months of tedious testing draw to a close. After 2 years of design, construction, and testing, Alouette flies across the continent to Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. A conventional turboprop aircraft of the RCAF carries the bird of space that soon will soar imponderous. Alone, the little sphere will penetrate the intangible mathematics of the cosmos. Yet, in the crowded environment of Earth, its sensitivity must be protected. There remain 6 weeks of final testing. The Thor Agena B rocket waits in its 150-foot gantry to carry one of the most complex satellites yet put into orbit. Alouette is seated on the spring that will separate it from the rocket. The shroud that will protect it from frictional heat in the atmosphere during launch is closed. The press enjoy the free tradition of science. DRB's Dr. John Chapman draws attention to the flags of the cooperating nations. Alouette's investigation of the upper atmosphere makes Canada a leader among the nations in space research for purposes of peace. Hours before liftoff, the scientists responsible assembled in the Mission Direction Center for the countdown. Keith Brown of DRB is mission director. Day spins into night over the Pacific coast. NASA's Dr. Dryden and Dr. Zimmerman of DRB watch and wait.
Fuel counter to 0. Fuel counter to 0. Add propulsion engineer. Add propulsion engineer. Verify TV ready. TVs are ready. INF. INF here. Place all 3 position switches off. All 3 position switches are off.
19. Go ahead. Check 19A, B,
On my mark, it will be T-minus.
Converter 4 alone was on battery 4.
9, 8,
And NRC operation is normal for this phase of the launch.
3,
Check 19D and E.
1. Mark.
The beacon is minus 65. Spacecraft temperatures are within tolerance.
60 seconds to now, we'll be picking up the thermal cup. Spacecraft, or launch conductor, are you ready? Spacecraft ready. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lift off.
South across Antarctica and north across Africa. Toward the North Polar region. From beyond the imperceptible surface of Earth's atmosphere, signals come to Resolute, one of the 13 telemetry stations around the globe which record Alouette's observations. Signals in the language of the stars, observed, recorded, and translated into a language understood by scientists who speak the many tongues of men.
Nanaimo, British Columbia, has many distinguishing landmarks. The Bastion, a relic of earlier and more dangerous days, is just one of them. The modern ferries from the mainland come and go in the busy harbor. And for 364 days a year, the people of Nanaimo go about their business in a calm and orderly fashion. There is nothing to make you suspect that underneath this placid exterior lurks a strange mania, a preoccupation with bathtubs. People don't look strange, and they don't act strange. They seem content with their local amenities and such diversions as may occasionally come their way.
Hey, got any bathtubs?
Bathtubs?
To go across the street.
Now, there are bathtubs and there are bathtubs, although there may not seem to be too much difference to the inexperienced eye. But people of all ages in Nanaimo know a good tub when they see one. A good tub has two important characteristics. It must be light and watertight, not to keep the water in, to keep the water out. There are easier ways to get to Vancouver, but for one glorious day every year, Nanaimo is not interested in the easy way.
I found one over there.
Early each summer, people scour the city for tubs, and the backyards of Nanaimo are converted into miniature shipyards, each devoted to the production of one splendid vessel. Hot competition for suitable craft drives the price of old bathtubs to dizzy heights. Thanks, big spender. Now, you may wonder what possesses these otherwise sane and normal folk to go more than 20 miles in such an outlandish craft as a bathtub. The answer is simple. Once a year, the sporting blood of the people of Nanaimo comes to a boil for the great annual bathtub race. It started as a centennial celebration, and it grew into a way of life. The fever has now spread far and wide, but it's Nanaimo's event, and they proudly claim the title, the bathtub capital of the world. The rules of the race are really quite simple. Cross the Strait of Georgia in a bathtub. Some use fiberglass castings, while our true purists here insist upon the genuine article. Every means of flotation known to man is permitted, but the maximum engine size is limited to 6 horsepower. Now, building a bathtub that will survive this kind of a voyage calls for coordination of effort, close study of the fine points of marine design, and lots of skilled help. Well, they won't need that. But in spite of everything, the craft slowly goes together. The tub is mounted on a planing hull, the engine is installed, it's checked and tuned. None too soon either. It's the day before the race, and the city has entered the first stages of its annual madness. The harbor is filling up with a weird and wonderful collection of craft, all milling about under the piratical eye of Mayor Frank Ney, the admiral of the Bathtub race festivities. Meanwhile, back at the shipyard, it won't be long before another addition to the Bathtub Navy will be ready to be commissioned. There is but derision and scorn to be heaped upon the creation of others, necessary preliminaries for any serious competition. The day before the race is given over to sea trials and a sail past. Seagoing bathtubs may look peculiar, but some of them display a handy turn of speed under the critical observation from the experts on shore. Race day. Now's the time when all the painstaking design and elaborate theory put into points will be put to the test. It's a long way to Vancouver, and a glorified bathtub is not the most comfortable vessel afloat. Hoyts has never been in the water before, so no one knows if she will even float, let alone survive the race. Hey, she seems to float pretty well. The harbor is a bedlam, with contestants making last-minute trials as escort boats circle for their position. And Hoyts does what bathtubs were designed to do, take in a little water. The crack of the starting gun unleashes the whole crazy armada, surging towards the harbor mouth, heading for the open sea. A special lookout is posted to pick out the first swamp tubber. He's going to be presented with the special award, the Order of the Golden Plunger. When the race was first run, Mayor Ney and his Bathtub Society staff anticipated a turnout of maybe 8 to 10 tubs. This year, upwards of 600 assorted vessels have joined in this mad dash for the mainland. Now, the tubs may look like a marine engineer's nightmare, but they are effective. The winners hammer over the 23-mile course in 2 spray-drenched hours. The great annual bathtub race is held in conjunction with Vancouver Sea Festival, and thousands of Vancouverites jam the beaches at the finish line. The winner may surge across in 2 hours, but not everybody wins. While the victory celebrations begin in Vancouver, a long trail of lonely, waterlogged tubbers stretches back across the sea. To this gallant band, winning is no longer a prime consideration. Now, it's a matter of keeping the tub afloat and making it to the finish line. By the time our wet and weary hero straggles in, the welcome has already begun to wear thin. But to the dedicated tubber, none of this really matters. Over 3/4 of the brave company who started came to grief. So it's really making it that counts.
Hi, Dad. Yeah, I made it. Well, only around 45th. Had to bail most of the way. The motor?
And for all the tubbers who made it, some hard-earned recognition. A small object, but in Nanaimo, it's highly prized. The Golden Bathtub Award. Now the prizes and praises are distributed. Brief speeches made and lots of kissing.
You're now on the upper deck. Raw courage and true bathtub seamanship. My compliments and your Golden Bathtub Award. Today, British Columbia has proved that they lead the world in bathtub technology, and around here, people seem to prefer corn to culture. Where's my bathtub bottle? Where's my bottle? Where's my bathtub?
Thank you, Mayor Ney. So that's the end of Bathtub Mania for another year. Our proud and somewhat smug hero goes home by a more orthodox means of transportation, and his life returns to normal. Or does it? Just wait until next year.
Somebody should rub it off.
Won't really do the trick.
Huh?
In our polite society, discrimination comes in more subtle forms. Much more difficult to rub off.
Tricky words there, friend. Nothing wrong with discrimination. I discriminate every day.
Unfair discrimination, I mean. The behavior of the prejudiced person.
Prejudiced person? And what's prejudice?
Oddly speaking, it means prejudgment. Prejudgment based on insufficient evidence.
Right. And for my part, there's nothing much wrong with some sorts of prejudice.
There's something wrong with all sorts of prejudice.
Be realistic, friend. Everybody needs prejudgment. Everybody uses it every day. We can't possibly get all the facts. We make decisions on the best available information.
I agree that prejudgment is sometimes useful if you recognize its limitations and allow room for error.
Yeah. And I may be hit by lightning. But you don't see a lightning rod. Look, it's a big and busy world. Prejudice helps cut the corners. No harm done.
But as you say, it is a shortcut. And shortcuts can be dangerous.
Get down to cases.
Marjorie, when is this going to stop?
Darling, you just have a silly prejudice against them.
Indeed I have. I'm prejudiced against eggs, all eggs.
And now you're generalizing.
An egg, Marjorie, is an egg. They do have a certain uniformity.
Now let's try once more, dear. Please. You never know.
We are determined, aren't we?
Very. Eggs are so good for you.
They may be good for you, but for me they're poison.
But protein, dear, you
That's
must...
what my mother told me, and it made me sick.
Maybe it was rotten.
I tried them scrambled in college, and they made me sick. I tried an omelet on our honeymoon, just for you, lover, and it made me sick. Okay?
Not once more? Not for Marjorie?
Never. Not coddled, not deviled, not pickled, not for Marjorie. Never, never another egg.
Perfectly reasonable. Prejudging the egg because of past experience and discriminating against it.
Quite so. But mind you, he does generalize about eggs.
Well, as he said, they do have a certain uniformity.
Yes, they do. And his generalization is based on adequate past experience. He tried eggs not once but several times, and each time they made him sick.
A discriminating man. Admirable.
Very well. Now let's take a look next door at a very discriminating man.
A poached egg may come from a hen, but an egg Benedict Bairstow is the work of angels.
An excellent hollandaise, I think, sir.
Of that, I have no doubt.
The coffee, sir, is the Colombian Excelso with chicory.
The Medina Excelso, I think, would be precisely right.
Precisely, sir. Very discriminating, if I might say so, sir. Very discriminating indeed.
Ah, yes, a discriminating man, in one sense of the word.
Life's too short. Who can decide every issue on the basis of experience?
Not many. Not even our friend. Observe.
An exquisite experience, as ever. And this evening?
This evening, sir? Tornado Bordelaise.
And with the Tornado, something a little new in the way of wines, this Chateau Noir, perhaps?
I think not, sir.
You are acquainted with the brand?
I have it on good authority, sir, that Chateau Noir is fit only to the four-legged animals.
I bow to you, Bairstow. We'll leave this Chateau Noir, as you say, to the beasts.
His decision is based on second-hand information. Now he has formed a prejudice against all wines made by Chateau Noir. He will discriminate against them.
But he has it on good authority. That butler of his knows his stuff.
No, I agree. The information is reliable, even though second-hand. And a man must trust his butler.
So his prejudice is reasonable and acceptable?
Hmm. But food and drink are one thing. Human relations are far more interesting and complex. Let's take a look at some people.
Occupational therapy. Ping pong. Amnesia.
Cool, man, cool. Who's making the scene next door? I mean, like, who rented the pad?
Some hairy-chested cats, man. You know, like athletes.
Who the devil are those fellows next door? Real, honest-to-goodness beatniks. Repulsive. You said it.
Man, all those muscles. Like, repulsive. Squares, man. Squares.
I've seen them.
beard's full of fleas, full of dope and alcohol, too, I bet.
Man, do we do the good neighbor bit with these cats?
Strictly antisocial, man. These cats are from Squaresville.
I've never met them. Hope I can keep it that way. Roger, I don't feel we have too much in common.
Lethargy, man. Sweet lethargy.
They have a mutual prejudice against each other. They've never met, yet they make assumptions.
Well, some of the assumptions may be unfair, but they've seen each other. They know the type. They don't have the same interests.
Sure. They may even have some conflict of interest.
Like, what are these cats building, man?
Cool it, man. You're the loudest.
So they'd be wasting the time having tea parties with each other. They're just using their heads.
Oh, to some extent they are.
You can't know everybody.
But you admit they're prejudging. They have a prejudice against each other.
Check.
And that's based on assumption. A generalization.
Right. But they have reasonable grounds.
Granted. But you have to admit room for possible error. Perhaps if they got to know each other, they might find some common interest.
They may be restricting themselves, but they aren't really hurting the other guy.
All right. Their prejudices may be unfortunate and restricting, but they are excusable and relatively harmless.
Well, that's my kind of prejudice.
Well, we've all got some kind of prejudice. Let's go below to the apartment of the landlord, Mr. Packer, and his son.
I wish those muscle men would shut up.
No, son. They're just young fellows having a little workout, keeping in shape. Splendid boys, I'm sure.
You never met them?
No. But I noticed the other day they were wearing the old school tie.
Half your old schoolmates are in jail.
The boys of hallowed hall stick together. Right or wrong, thick or thin. We never forget the old school.
Old school indeed. Now, here is prejudice in favor of a group that is not based primarily on reason.
It seems like more of an emotional thing.
Right. Emotional. Irrational.
Still, it's sort of nice of him to feel that way.
A bit dangerous, but at least it's positive. However, it can work the other way.
Can't you play quietly like other children? Go on, get out of here. Go play on your own street. What do you expect from Onion Street?
On Onion Street live a group of immigrants. They're poor, and they speak another language.
Zabielkoepka.
Abuti nekartanetka.
Neamkirni Bayorgo.
Mazukelo Beros Bolta.
Packer doesn't know them. They've never caused him harm. As a matter of fact, they're potentially good customers.
But they're strange, different.
That should breed curiosity, but not hatred.
Noisy, smelly little vipers.
Maybe he's heard things about them.
All of them?
Well,
No. There's no reliable second-hand information here. Actually, he was told in school that they were industrious and artistic. But Packer is so filled with emotional prejudice that he lumps them all together in one wild overgeneralization and calls them all
greasy onions.
It's senseless, and it shows itself in many little ways. For example, the next morning.
Mr. Packer? Mr. Packer, my mother would like a saucepan.
Right over there. Devil. Let you onions inside a place and you mess everything up. You're nothing but trouble. Now go on. Get out of here. And stay out of here, you onions. Oh, Mr. Bairstow. What can I do for you?
I'm looking for a double boiler, Mr. Packer.
Well, now, Mr. Bairstow, perhaps over here.
Just the thing. Goodness. Oh, dear me.
My dear Mr. Bairstow, I do hope you didn't injure yourself.
No, but I'm afraid I made a terrible mess.
Oh, not at all, not at all. I'll have everything shipshape in jig time. Oh, did you get your double boiler?
I get your point. Reasonable in some areas,
but full of blind, irrational prejudice when it comes to onions. But now, another aspect. It is evening.
But, Dad, if you'd only meet her.
I don't have to meet her, son.
But her father's a doctor.
A doctor? He probably makes potions out of toads and witches' hair.
Oh, lay off. She's helped me with math and physics. She's really exceptional.
Have you seen her mother? Have you? Fat and greasy, shawl on her head, rings in her ears. And this girl of yours will grow up to be the same.
I just wanted to take her to a show. We had a date. Oh, well, it's too late now anyway.
She may look all right now, son, but she's an onion. They're all alike. Her people and ours just don't mix. You stick to your own kind. Let her stick to hers.
Poor kid.
Another quality of this evil type of prejudice. It's inflexible, rigid. The unreasonably prejudiced man will turn a deaf ear to any evidence that will prove him wrong. Mr. Packer, for example, will admit the odd exception, but nothing worth changing his generalization about. Packer's son has just been forced into unfair discrimination, perhaps for the first time.
But he doesn't really seem to be prejudiced.
Well, this time he's simply taking the easy way out. But if he stays close to Daddy, and it looks like he will, unfair discrimination will become a rule.
Only 2 rules of the firm to remember, my boy. Don't take any wooden nickels, and never trust an onion.
It grows into suppression of a minority. Doors are closed. The son will have to justify his unfair discrimination. He will do this by developing all kinds of prejudices against the onions. Not the prejudices which are reasonable, not the prejudices which are excusable, but a prejudice based on emotion. A prejudice against a group whose common bond is an accident of birth. A prejudice which is based on wild overgeneralization. A prejudice which closes the mind to argument. Racial or religious prejudice would remain an unhealthy personal problem if kept to oneself. But prejudice becomes a social problem when it leads to unfair discrimination.
But even the Packers don't go around doing that.
There are degrees of discrimination, my friend. There's the joker.
After about 3 days of this, who comes to the door but another onion? Just off the boat.
Yes?
She was really curious this time. And the onion head says, "Excuse me, madam,
There's the name caller.
My, that's a nice young lad you have here, Mrs. Adams. So unlike that dirty, greasy onion trash."
There is social discrimination. There's economic discrimination. Then may come violence. Tricky words. Mental shortcuts. Well, they may be useful, but dangerous. Innocent people sometimes get exterminated. That's the ultimate solution for certain discriminating gentlemen of our time.
thanks everybody for watching today, even though we were pre-recorded. As always, you can support us by hitting the thumbs up or the like button. Those are great ways to tell the algorithms that drive our post-literate automated society that AV Geeks deserves to live at least another day. Another way you can support us is going to ko-fi.com/avgeeks or patreon.com/avgeeks. There's a ways to buy us coffee, or what's happening more recently is we're buying shelving, we're buying things as we are moving films from our nasty basement at the archive to better conditions so that we can potentially renovate the basement and make it climate controlled and waterproof and all that stuff. That's more about that as it happens. There seems to be bigger powers at work besides us that are determining whether or not this can happen. Another way you can support us is just watching the channel, and because we get ad revenue from many of the videos, and believe it or not, we're making enough ad revenue that we're covering the storage unit costs. We have now 4 storage units. So thanks again for tuning in. We'll be back again the next business day. This is a pre-recorded message, so I don't know what day we're going to be showing this, but tune in, and we will see you soon. Everybody take care. Bye.